right, now we are going to go to our opening comments. 1 hour and a half, 2 hours later. Any members of the board wish to make comments? I have Supervisor Buster, no? Supervisor Stone.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. A couple of things to report. There is a nationwide organization that monitors government fleet services, and they have a report, the 2012 Government Fleet 100 Best Fleets announced. And I'm very proud to announce that Riverside County Purchasing and Fleet Services, Robert Hoddyshelf and Department, was amongst those 100 in the country. So I would like to thank Bob Hoddyshelf for the good job, Lorenz, Ed Trujillo, along with all the certified fleet technicians that work in our, for our 17,000 employees from Riverside to Life. What a great job, we're very proud of you. And then they're going to do another cut to this and name the top 10. Maybe we'll be in the top 10, but again, kudos to our employees. Also, last week I attended the Victims' Right Vigil in Temecula. I'd like to applaud our district attorney for putting on another nice event to recognize the victims of crime and to honor their families. And there's a rather touching speaker that lost her son to domestic violence from a young lady who is now in jail. Also want to announce that Rancho Springs Hospital in the Southwest is going to begin their SART program this month, their sexual assault response team, so that we can respond to victims of sexual assault in Southwest without having to have these victims go all the way to our Moreno Valley campus to be evaluated so that we can have the appropriate forensics exam to ensure that the district attorney has all the tools to prosecute these heinous individuals. And then lastly, Supervisor Ashley and I attended the CBAG meeting last night, and they were the beneficiaries to a $200,000 grant to pretty much master plan electrical fueling sites in the Coachella Valley. And I think that was a wonderful achievement. And I think that we as a county need to begin or further the process of providing for electrical vehicle infrastructure, as there is a lot of competition within the domestic automobile manufacturing companies and international manufacturing companies. The only issue for many people, including myself, is the range in which vehicles can travel on a charge. There is one domestic company, though, that is developing an assembly line car that will be rolling off the factory floors in July. I'm sure many of you have heard of Tesla. They came out with a roadster that is no longer in production. They're custom-made cars that got in excess of 250 miles to the charge. Their new Model S, which is coming out, and by the way, I don't want any stock of these vehicle companies, but I want to just report that the new Tesla is going to have a 300-mile range and can be charged in your garage in 3 hours. So why is this good news? Because it's going to put a lot of pressure on domestic auto companies and international car manufacturers, such as Honda, that's going to come out with their electric vehicle this summer, although it's not going to have the range of the domestic Tesla. But the Tesla's range is going to put a lot of pressure on these companies to make these cars go further, which is going to entice Americans to abandon their fossil fuel, even their hybrid vehicles, when you can just come home at night, plug in your car, get up in the morning, and be able to drive 300 miles. I think this is going to be a revolutionary change in the way Americans transport themselves before the end of this decade. We need to be ready. We need to be ready to have charging stations. We need to condition commercial projects to ensure that we have the charging stations in mind. hit all of our fleet services departments. We need to go after these grants to make sure that we have the charging stations available. And by the way, for our sheriff, these new vehicles that are going to be released this summer, they go 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds. So there may be some opportunities years from now to looking at working with these manufacturers to come up with a Crown Vic type of structured car that will reduce this county's dependence on foreign oil for the 24 hours a week our police vehicles have to patrol, and hopefully add the added reinforcement of doors that have more metal to them, and making sure that our deputies are protected. That maybe we should be working with some of these local companies to come out with a public safety prototype that will be much more affordable for the taxpayers. I'm very excited about electrical vehicles, as you can tell. I do want to purchase one in the future, but I want to wait until the range will allow me to come the 45, 50 miles each way that I've got to come to the county without getting stuck on the side with no power. So, Mr. Chair, we're moving in the right direction, I think, and I really believe this is going to be a revolutionary change in the way we transport ourselves in the near future.
Thank you, Supervisor Stone. Nothing can jump a curb like a Crown Vic, right, Stan? Yep. All right, there are no further questions by members of the board. Mr. Orr, do you have any?
Yes, I'd like to recognize Bob Tremaine. This is Bob Tremaine's last board meeting. He's been a true gentleman in the executive office. He goes off to retirement tomorrow, so we wish him well.
Gee whiz, Bob, at least you could have done was tell some of us, a little ahead of time. Congratulations, well deserved. And Mr. Howdyshaw, congratulations to you and your staff on this. All right, there is no real update that I'm aware of on the state budget other than their revenue projections, I think, are now $3 billion more than what was anticipated, so that's going to cause some additional impacts with polarization at the state level and nothing getting done. So with that, we will go to additions, corrections, and deletions by our clerk of the board.
Good morning, members of the board. Additions are items 3.40 through 3.44. Deletion of item 9.4. Corrections are to continue item 3.38 to May 8th, 2012. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. We do have speakers on the consent calendar, speaker requests for 2.6 and 2.11. So with those changes, unless there are those items being pulled, unless there are any additional items, which I don't see any, I'm going to move that we approve the admin action calendar 1.1 through 1.2 and the consent calendar 2.1 through 2.13 with the changes for those that want to speak. Second. Motion and second, please vote. Motion is 4-0. Supervisor Benoit is not with us today. That will now take us to our first speaker, item 2.6. Rebecca?
Good morning, Council. I have a question on this approval of the amended conflict of interest code for the Yoruba Community Services District. Well, I went and I paid for a copy of that. You're really making it difficult for a layman to understand what it is you're doing here. And I'm really having a problem with the transparency, only on the basis that you give out codes, which keeps us going around in circles. I would like to request that you could please, if you're going to give us government codes, section numbers, and all this other stuff, if you could give us a little synopsis so that we know what you are doing when you go take a vote. it would really be beneficial because it says here the Board of Supervisors approve your Rupa Community Services District conflict of interest. And you really don't go into detail of what that conflict of interest is. And we have different codes being thrown at us, which will keep us busy for a little while in order to track down the info. And one of the big things that I'm wondering, would that have anything to do with the taxes being supported in that district? Or such as maybe a transit tax? That kind of thing. That's why I'm interested in having a little bit more transparency on these items before you take it to a block vote.
Thank you, Rebecca. That information, additional information, is always available to you or anyone else just by requesting it through the clerk of the board.
I know, but we don't have enough time to be running around because you have this on the first thing on the agenda.
Thank you.
And you will block it.
This board took an action about 10 years ago to reduce the taxpayer dollars by not providing all the additional information that certain people can request. You can get it, you're able to access it, but in the interest of trying to save paper and the taxpayer some dollars, we don't provide a copy of every ordinance along with each item. We just don't do that. But it is available to you, and if you'd like, we can provide that to you before the end of the meeting and for your review.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
but I really still would like more transparency, please.
Point 6.
Second comment, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
Supervisor Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, if we read the agenda items, I think you'll see that we're being more transparent with the submitted conflict of interest code. It identifies which employees have to fill out these forms that have to be filed so that there's public disclosures about people that work within these districts that may have potential conflicts of interest. It goes into great details about the disclosure categories 1 through 5. So what I might suggest is that maybe the county consider, I think it would be a very nominal expense, to having a kiosk in the foyer of the county building that will allow those that don't have access to a computer to look at the details of our agenda items. They might want to get to the county a little bit early so that they can see those, and of course that should be at no charge. So that the details of the agenda item, if they don't have the resources to go to a library and print them, which is understandable, things are very tough these days, but we have made an effort to go paperless in this county, which is saving the county millions of dollars. But just to reassure the speaker that this is providing more transparency, it's making sure that we're able to see those people that are making decisions in the appropriate interest of the agencies in which they serve, and not in their personal best financial interests. So with that, maybe we can look into getting one of these low-cost kiosks out there so that you have the computer capability of seeing more detail of the agenda items before you come into the meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
All right. Excuse me. A motion and a second on item 2.6. Please vote. Motion passes 4-0. Item 2.11, Rebecca.
It was brought to their attention at the city of Riverside that the Chamber of Commerce is not distributing funds equally among all the chambers. There is the white, Hispanic, African American, Asian, and then the Indian tribal. The white seems to be getting the benefit of all that. I'm going to be checking into how you're distributing your funds regarding the Chamber of Commerce's, because I don't think that's fair for one to be able to participate maybe in the Mission Inn lighting. I think different cultures have something to bring, and I think that you should distribute that money equally so they each have a turn so that they can display their ethnic and diverse backgrounds too. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Supervisor Ashley.
Move approval.
I'll second your motion. Please vote. Item 3.3. Motion carries 4-0. That now takes us to item 3.19, and that is Brett Holstrom. Brett. Emergency Services, item 3.19.
I don't believe that you have described adequately what this grant includes to the general public. And for that reason, I wish that you would not vote on it right now. We have a lot of issues regarding the fire and emergency vehicles performance out in the county, which range from elder abuse, not connected with this other lady, that's something different that I don't know. But they've had continual elder abuse between the fire department and the emergency vehicles there, including the ambulance, serious ones. I would like you to apply for a grant, either in addition to this or in place of this, that actually scrutinizes the management, the services as the fire department and the emergency vehicles are supposed to perform vis-a-vis us. It is serious now, it has been continuing for many years, and I will be writing to you case by case, and also generally as to what has been going on there. It is not conducive to good management of the health of the seniors, nor the transport of the seniors, and it is degrading, and the staff have actually been lying to the public. I found that out by talking to the supervisor of AMR. They had leveled false charges, saying that they will not transport, like for instance, a mother who has a child in the ambulance, or a spouse who has a spouse ill in the back who would like to go with them in the units. They said no, because our insurance does not carry this. It doesn't cover that. Besides, we have been ripped off by riders. So there are a lot of other components that I think you have not included in some grants, or you're scrutinizing of what type of management you would like us to involve here. Like I said, I don't know all the components about this grant, and the reason for that is because you haven't vetted it to the public. We need to be informed, particularly with these life-saving services. We need to know every component of it because it serves us and actually may save a life or ruin a life. And that's all I say right now. But I will be in continual communication with at least Mr. Buster. But it's not just in our district. It is across district. We're dealing with a monopoly of services with the AMR. And by the way, if I have this opportunity right now, these services should always be put out for bid. It's long in coming. And it's an atrocity that we haven't had them out for bid before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holstrom. Supervisor Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments of the speaker. This is a request to file for a CalEMA grant. These are federal funds that will go to our county fire department and help our emergency preparedness. It would be imprudent to not apply for this almost $575,000 in grants. For that reason, we would have recommendation.
Second your motion, item 3.19, please vote. Motion carries 4-0. Item 3.29, Mr. Grant.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Catherine and Lynn. Good morning. I pulled this resolution and requirement with regard to the lighting, landscaping of these areas. The TLMA obviously were the ones that maintained these lights prior to this request. And I have difficulty in taking this vote, which I think the vote will not pass by virtue of the fact that traffic lights and lighting of streets is one of the important parts of transportation and should therefore be under the consideration of transportation rather than the individual property owners. I think this is an unfair practice, but I appreciate the fact that you're observing 218 and taking it to the public. But I feel that both of these issues on your agenda are a waste of time. You should have directed this to the state in the relationship to county traffic and the cost of this burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I don't think there are any questions by member of the board, so with that, I'll move approval of item 3.29.
Mr. Chair, I'll second it. Again, it's very disappointing that we have speakers that come up to the podium and do not read the staff reports. This has nothing to do with traffic signals. This is just a lighting and maintenance district for streetlights and landscaping that is going to be borne by property owners within this district. And so I support the motion.
Concur, and I'll second your motion. Please vote. Motion carries 4-0. Now taking us to item 3.37, our executive office third quarter budget report. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. We were privileged to have our economist here to lay the foundation for today's discussion on Riverside County's third quarter report. I'm going to ask Mr. Corser to come forward. He's going to give you a presentation on where we're at right now. It's a culmination of a lot of hard work by the department heads. Many who are present in the room, I want to thank you for working so hard this year and getting your targets, working hard. There's a lot of hard work to be done in the future. We began this year with a very large gap of about $80 million, and we closed that gap significantly to about $13 million, only to find out that we anticipate that the property taxes are going to be down about 2% or so this coming year, to create another gap of $23 million. We need to put all options on the table to achieve more with less, and we need to plan for future cuts in 12-13 so we can position ourselves for 13-14 and 14-15. Mr. Corser will explain that. We believe that things will get positive, and we'll see some recovery in 14-15, but the pace of change that we need to make now to position ourselves needs to increase. We can control our spending primarily through more cost efficiencies, and that's where we're going to have department heads meet in June to put all options on the table so we can be more efficient and more lean. However, we do anticipate a reduction in workforce as we go forward in this coming year. We need to do this because we're going to have other costs that we're going to incur in the coming years. PSEC will come on board. We need to prepare for jail construction, jail operations, and other priorities of the board that are coming forward in the near future. I look forward to Mr. Corser's presentation and input and direction from the board. Mr. Corser.
Thank you very much, and my name is Ed Corser with the Executive Office, and one comment on the state budget that I've been thinking about, Mr. Tavaglione, is the fact I read the other day the state budget going into next year is at least $10 billion short of balance, so the problem just keeps getting worse. They're not going ahead with these trigger cuts for whatever reason, either court intervention or whatever, so but that's always an outlier for us to deal with later. I'm not going to talk about it any further, but recognize that that's a big issue. Just to comment on where we've been quickly, where we are now, and where we're going, which is the most important thing. Thanks for listening for what was it, 2 hours worth of dismal science this morning about where we're going with the economy. I think I can cut to the chase pretty quickly here. We're growing. It looks like there's good news ahead, but we're hearing this thing nationally, and we're not looking closely enough at what's happening at the local level. I think you heard at the very end what's happening at the local level. The bottom line is we are growing, and in the future the property taxes, which is 80% of our revenue, is going to increase, but we're growing very slowly, and it's not going to happen at any time soon. I think the people from Fullerton said, if I can size up what their numbers said in their written material, that property tax revenues will increase in 13-14, that's a year from now, by 0.5%. Okay, that's about $2 million. The following year, maybe 4%, or 2%, I'm sorry, and then 4%. Beacon Economics is more aggressive, but I tend to stick with the more conservative numbers for the time being, just because until we get rid of double-digit unemployment, which is a leading indicator for housing demand, we're not going to have the housing demand. And that's a problem for us in terms of property tax revenues. We will see additional sales taxes. I believe that Beacon Economics is a little bit more aggressive on that in terms of the growth over the next few years than the Fullerton people, and I would stick with their conservative estimate. I mention that simply because I'm going to use that in a couple of the charts we have here. So as far as where we've been, quickly to reiterate, over the last 5 years, we've lost $230 million of our ongoing revenue. We've managed to keep our head above water by the judicious use of reserves and significant cuts, while balancing that with maintaining the most essential services. For sure, there have been reductions, but we've been able to maintain the essential services, and we hope to do that going forward. That's where we've been. Where we are right now, I mentioned in March when we got together that we're looking at a shortfall, Mr. Orr just mentioned this too, of about $13 million going into the 12-13 fiscal year. In addition to that, then we have the assessor who has yet to officially weigh in on where the property tax is going to go, which we're pretty sure is down. So in June, you will get a budget that may not reflect that property tax item, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the June budget is really just a placeholder to give us spending authority for July 1st. We really get to August and September when we get the final budget taken care of. So that's where we are. We're looking at probably $23 million short that we need to deal with in next fiscal year. Then looking forward, which is this important thing, here is the deal that we cut. Our primary mission was pension reform, right? We wanted to get rid of EPMC, and we wanted to have a lower tier of benefits going forward. There's no question that in the long haul, that's going to make a tremendous difference for us. It's going to reduce our costs significantly. The problem is the short haul. In the short haul, we have the issue of a couple of things that are included. The bargaining agreements essentially call for costs which will exceed to some extent the savings over the first 3 to 4 years, the term of the current contracts. We have to take that into consideration. Labor costs, pension costs. I think I mentioned this last time. They are going to increase for 2 reasons. One is we're now digging out of that hole created by the failure of the stock market in '98, was it, whatever it was, or '08, I'm sorry. And that's part of the reason, because we're having to pay back the system for the money that we lost. The other is that CalPERS recently reduced their assumed earnings rate going forward, so that is going to cause additional cost for the county too. So we have those 2 items that are going to cost us money over the next 3 to 4 years. And we have to weigh that against what the economists are saying, which is we're going to have slow growth in revenue. Now the deal that came about when we went into these bargaining agreements was this. We are willing to pay the extra money for merits and COLAs and so forth in 2 respects. One is that we're going to get this pension reform. That's just about a done deal. The other is we're assuming a growth in revenue going forward because it will take money to pay those costs. If we don't have the revenue going forward, we will have fewer employees. That's just the way it ends up. So that's where we are right now, is looking at where are we going forward in terms of cost and in terms of revenue. So the first sheet I'd like to put down is a comparison. You've heard some pretty big numbers in terms of the labor agreements that have been put together in terms of cost, but you need to recognize that when we look at the real cost to net county, that the real cost is significantly less for net county than it is overall. So that if you have essentially $100 in additional cost, $80 of that 100 is going to be paid for by others. Let's say the state, we run programs for the state. They give us money for those employees, and money that goes out, basically, they reimburse us for the labor costs. We have other departments. We have waste and flood, we have the hospital. They are all separate operations. They will, we hope, come up with the revenue to pay those costs. That does not become a county, net county cost obligation. We have the cost of patrol that goes to contract cities. Unfortunately, that cost is going to be passed on to them. So when it gets down to the bottom line for us in our net county budget that we try to hold close to, it turns out to be about 20% of the overall cost. So you need to know that up front. So looking at this chart, and you see the bottom line numbers, it looks like this is no big problem. What's the issue here? 2 million, 5 million, 13 million. We should be able to climb out of that pretty easy. Well, it doesn't show the 12-13 budget because it's only intended to show beyond that when these labor costs come on. Well, we have the $23 million shortfall already. That has to be dealt with. And then again, what we have here is, if you add the red bars over the 3 years, which include the new pension costs and the new labor costs, and you add them all up, at the end of the term in 15-16, you will have an ongoing cost to net county of about $50 million. We have to have that ongoing. We've divided this up so that every year, as the problem arises, we address it. We address it with either additional revenue or we make cuts. The other thing that you need to know here is that the yellow portions of these bars represent Prop 172 increase. If you recall, a year or two ago, we decided, well, we talked about a policy which would establish a limit on how much Prop 172 goes to pay operating budget shortfalls, because we know we have to set aside money for this jail that's coming up. Well, the truth of the matter was that our budget situation has been so tight, we've had to use that money to balance the budget. We need to start looking at taking that yellow portion out of these bars in the future and either having additional revenue or making further cuts. And I'll tell you why that is in just a second. So basically what we have is an ongoing $50 million cost at the end of the term of the current labor agreements. In addition, what we have by the year 15-16, if we don't have that new jail built, it's almost built, and the sheriff is going to want to start ramping up staffing for that ahead of time. The latest estimate I've got for that is debt service on the building, $10 million a year, labor cost for staffing, $50 to $60 million a year. We have to have $60 to $70 million ongoing money starting at the end of this term to staff that jail. We don't want to build it and not be able to staff it. So even though these bars look fairly easy to deal with, there's this underlying problem. We have to quit using one-time money. We have to start setting aside Prop 172 because we've got a jail to build. The labor agreements are contracts, the pension system is a contract, and the jail that we're going to build is now a contract. We've taken $100 million from the state, we've agreed to build this jail, and we better staff it. So all of those things are going to come into play over these years, besides just the issue of labor and pension cost increases. And I mention that just to show you that we need to address these things up front. Instead of every year coming in trying to chase the problem, we need to jump ahead of the problem. So I'm going to the second page if there's no questions on that particular. Here's the problem in its largest sense. For the 12-13 budget, we will bring to you a budget, like I say, in June, that is balanced, but there's some one-time money in there because it's a placeholder. We've gotten the news about assessments too late in the game for us, and we need to wait until the budget closes and we close the books, which will be in August-September timeframe. That's when we know whether or not we've got that extra $40 million, you remember, in fund balance that we're using to balance the budget. By that time, maybe we'll know what the state is going to do to us in terms of revenue hits. And we can make a final decision on where we're going with cutting the budget in September, October. That would mean we would probably report to the board sometime in mid-November to deal with our first quarter report and what we're going to do with balancing this budget. That's $23 million. But what we're recommending now is that we go ahead and look at 13-14. You saw the $2 million cost there. In addition, the new public safety radio system will be fully loaded and up and running by 13-14. In fact, I believe it starts this next year, halfway through the year. There's an additional cost in operating that new system, which is in the neighborhood, I believe, of about $8 million, of which $5 million will be needed by the sheriff to handle that share of the operation. We're assuming that that $5 million is something that the sheriff may or may not be able to deal with, but since we have been protecting public safety along the way here, we need to look at maybe covering that through other cuts. So I'm saying that by the time we get to November, we should be looking at another cut of $30 million to departments if we're going to keep up with the curve that's before us in terms of slow revenue growth and increasing costs. That's why Mr. Orr has mentioned we're going to be meeting with the department managers. It's not going to be the desk jockeys in the CEO's office. It's going to be department managers and others who have good ideas on how we can get there. And it's not going to be by small increments. You can see the magnitude of the problem. So by reducing a manager or making a change, let's take a hypothetical, if we want to move code enforcement, let's say, to the sheriff, it's, you know, and unless the sheriff deputies are going to handle code enforcement between calls, you're not saving a lot of money. You're just moving one function to another location. That's not going to save us a whole lot of money. If there's a different way of skinning that cat, that's a different issue. But you've got to look at it in, are we going to save money now or in the future? And a good example is the merger we're having between the health agency and the hospital. We're looking at the future cost and revenue that comes out of affordable health care. And in that case, we need to merge the clinics with the hospital so that we can make the best use of our resources to attract the money that's coming out. That's looking down the line. Of course, it doesn't necessarily provide us with savings right away. But we need some real creative thinking, and it has to be sincere and it has to be serious to make these cuts as we go forward. We will get there, but what we're pointing out is the need to be more aggressive, as Mr. Orr has said, in what we do going forward. So we expect in November to have some additional cuts, and we'll have a chance to review those at that time. Our report pretty much stands on its own. You'll see one of the things we have in there. We have, I think, our recommendation number 1. We've lost redevelopment. We've gutted our capital program. We need to start setting some money aside for capital facilities going forward. We're hoping that there's going to be some money that comes out of this redevelopment demise that is going to be additional revenue to the county. I would assume that the sale of assets may provide some one-time money. I would also assume that as projects complete and the money is then siphoned out, that we'll get our 12%. I'm not sure that's the case because I can't read the complexities of what's going on right now, but we need a way to start building up our capital program. So if you have any questions on the recommendations of the report or what's in it, I'd be glad to answer or comment on what I've said.
Supervisor Ashley?